The legislation imposes economic sanctions and travel restrictions on Russians named as human rights abusers. The act is named after Russian tax attorney Sergei Magnitsky. He died in 2009 in a Russian prison where he was held for his work exposing corruption among people linked to the Kremlin.
The Russian government says the cause of death was heart failure, but many observers believe Magnitsky was murdered. Among them is American businessman Bill Browder, who was once the biggest foreign investor in Russia. He has since become a vocal critic of the country and has clashed with President Vladimir Putin's government. Magnitsky was Browder's tax attorney, and Browder was a driving force behind the legislation. And Bill is joining us live in studio. Great to have you here.
That was a great intro for this Bill Browder. They've painted Russia as enemy number one, human rights abuser and all. FYI, what they're not telling you is that Russia did its own investigation. Many people were fired. Many people went to trial, found guilty. Huge investigations. No, Russia itself was not happy over Magnitsky dying either. That's an important tidbit.
Bill, let's talk about the Magnitsky Act, because in your opinion, you say it is Putin's #1 priority to lift these sanctions from the Magnitsky Act. It affects some 44 Russians right now. Why is this such a big deal for Vladimir Putin?
Well, Vladimir Putin is a kleptocrat. For 17 years, he's been taking lots of money from Russia. He's probably the richest man in the world now. And we've been able to trace from the crime that Sergei Magnitsky exposed a $230 million tax rebate fraud. And we've been able to trace some of that money from the fraud to a man named Sergei Roldugin, who was exposed in the Panama Papers as Putin's trustee or nominee. This is the famous $2 billion cellist. And so Putin has gotten some of the money. And because Putin has gotten some of the money, that means that
Okay, I really don't like the way this guy talks. I've been looking for other interviews for him because what you see as he talks,
the money. And because Putin has
he's stiff. He doesn't really move.
Gotten some of the money. That means that all of Putin's money in the West is potentially exposed and could be frozen. And so this is just a very venal, personal thing for Vladimir Putin, that he doesn't want his money frozen.
Your book.
See, I don't like that. When I see that, it's like, okay, I'm suspicious. And that's why I went and had to look up what in the world this Magnitsky thing is. Because he is suspicious. You're stiff. You had talking points that you've memorized. And none of these interviews that I went and looked for, nobody challenged him. Putin's involved. Putin's involved. Putin's involved. It's got to be Putin. Nobody asked him, how do you know? Nothing. It's Putin, Putin, Putin. What's the link? What about that guy? Is he in trouble? I can't find any information on him. Something smells like fish. It's stinky. It's real stinky when I kept looking through and I noticed the Clinton Foundation was involved. It's like, oh, they're the ones wanting sanctions on Russia? Blaming Putin? Something's funny. I also found it very curious in my readings with this. How come we're worried about another country's tax evasion that has nothing to do with us? Because I sure as hell don't remember anybody worrying about the Clinton Foundation and its tax hoo-haws, or its corruption, or the McCain's Foundation and its corruption. I don't remember that at all. How come we're worried about what's going on inside of Russia? Oh, I know. It's called having leverage on someone and using any excuse you can to put your leverage on them. Duh.
Red Notice, which was written, I think, in 2015, right? I mean, I read it a couple years ago. It's fascinating to go back and read that, given what's happening now. The lawyer and the lobbyist who met with Don Trump Jr., as well as Paul Manafort and Jared Kushner. What do you think they were up to?
Well, the lawyer, her name is Natalia Veselnitskaya. She works for a Russian oligarch, a guy named Pyotr Kotsev.
And he's still stiff. To me, that's suspicious. We already know this is bogus. This is an older one because I had to go back. I was looking for something where he wasn't being stiff on this subject.
Steve is a government official. He works for a Russian state railway company, which is one of the most important companies. And he was funding the anti-Magnitsky campaign in America. He was basically, I should also point out that his son's assets were frozen by the Department of Justice in America because they also received some of the money from the Magnitsky crime. And so Natalia Veselnitskaya was taking money from a Russian oligarch who's close to Vladimir Putin to try to overturn the Magnitsky Act.
Okay, I do not like defending Putin, especially when I don't have all the evidence. But if we go by this guy's logic, someone who is close to Putin, he got money. With that same logic, Trump is guilty too. All the criminal stuff of Manafort, He's met and donated to the Clintons. That's criminal. He's close. Did the same thing with McCain. Yep, by this guy's logic, Trump is a criminal too. I just wanted to point that out. I have no idea on Putin. He could be.
She then hires this guy, Rinat Akhmetshin, who is by all accounts, some kind of shady former Soviet spy.
And see how close he's keeping his elbows to himself and his hands? These people are in the USA, his sanctuary, so to speak. Politicians here protect him. So he has nothing to fear. Yet he is a scaredy cat. He is extremely stressed and stiff on this rhetoric that he's given out. His body doesn't sing with him at all. Something smells about this whole thing, which is why I kept digging and digging. I couldn't find much anything else on his interviews about this whole thing. Let's find another one.
Welcome back to Morning Joe. Joining us now is Bill Browder. He's the man who inspired the Magnitsky Act, a bill that singled out a number of Putin allies and denied them U.S. visas. Because of that, Browder has been called Putin enemy number one. Jeremy Bass.
Besides what he just said, Putin allies, those are the actual sanctions. Whenever you hear about Russian sanctions, that's the sanctions. All goes back to the Majinsky thingy. And I know I'm butchering his name, but that's what it goes back to. Those are the sanctions. Nothing to do with the Russian government, but that.
Ash is back with us as well. He's former chief of staff at the CIA and Department of Defense. Bill, good morning. It's good to see you.
Good to see you.
Just for our viewers, I want to back up a little bit and explain that you were the largest foreign investor in Russia for a time, right? Or one of them, anyway. Yep. Your attorney,
George Soros.
Sergei Magnitsky, exposed some tax fraud that was happening in Russia. He was jailed and, in fact, killed in jail. And you continue to fight the Putin regime every day. Why do you fight so hard against Russia and against Putin?
I sit there and saw from the corner of his eye. Let's see if I see what he's looking at.
Continue to fight the Putin regime every day. Why do you fight so hard against Russia?
He's focusing in on something. I thought he was accessing something, but he's accessing his talking points that he's got memorized.
Against Putin.
So my lawyer, Sergei Magnitsky, was killed, I should say tortured to death in a Russian prison.
By the way, that is confirmed when the Russians government did its investigation. Those people that were involved were prosecuted or fired, all the way up to generals. I just want to throw that out there.
In 2009.
Oh, and by the way, it's also what they find, and he's not saying in any of these interviews, I had to go read the news reports, that it wasn't government officials that were involved, it was companies. And these companies have friends of Russian government officials. They were calling them friends. But like I said, by that definition, then Trump is also guilty for his donations to the Democratic Party, Hillary Clinton, and to John McCain and all sorts.
For uncovering a massive Putin Russian government corruption scheme. And they killed him effectively as my proxy. They killed him because he worked for me. And that's a big responsibility. He was 37 years old. He left a wife and 2 children after being tortured to death. And so on the day when I learned of his...
And so I let that play for you. You see again how stiff he is. In none of these interviews does he ever actually just relax. He's just stiff. And he sticks to the same talking points. His name is Pete and Repeat. And for me, obviously, I see these things. I thought, suspicious. You're hiding. Now I have to go dig. Because you're not giving me any answers in your body because you're hiding. Only thing you're telling me is that you're being deceptive.
Murder, which is the day after they killed him, I made a vow to his memory, to his family, and to myself that I was going to go after the people who killed him and make sure they face justice. That was 8 years ago.
And of course, you see, as it's panned up, his hand on top of hand, he's not moving anything. He doesn't get relaxed. Again, he's in the USA. Friendly. Nobody's going to come and get you here. All the politicians are your friends.
And I've spent the last 8 years doing that, which has resulted in U.S. legislation named after Sergei Magnitsky, which imposes visa sanctions and asset freezes. And the asset freezes is the key part of this whole story, so that against people of the Putin regime who are involved in this and who do other terrible things in Russia. And Putin went crazy.
Just to give it a scale so people understand.
So he has said something. Putin went crazy. He got a slight smile on it, then switches over nonchalantly to the guy who's going to ask him the next question. So just give it to scale. I don't even have to guess. He's not being challenged on the comment of please give an example of Putin going crazy. Please tell us it's Putin. What exactly is going on? Because all we've heard is Putin would like to question you. That's all we've heard. I will say that there was a judgment against the man because he refused to show up to court. But even then, the Russian government got involved to investigate that. Who knew?
The scale, so people understand, you're going to assign a dollar amount to the effect to.
Obviously not challenged. And he swings over to look at this man like a robot. That deceptive hiding.
Putin's oligarchs, the money that is his in one form or another that he controls. We're talking the hundreds of billions of dollars here.
So I believe that Putin is the richest man in the world. I believe that he personally is worth $200 billion.
I hope you're hearing his words. I believe.
And I believe the people around him, let's say the top 1,000 officials in Russia, are worth $1 trillion.
So what does it say that we keep hearing the words, I believe? We don't hear any facts. We don't hear any evidence. We're seeing stiffness and we're hiding. That is not to say that everything is run peachy over there, but it is to say that his story has some cheesy holes.
There's so much money at stake here. This is such an important issue. And I should point out that this money is not kept in Russia. As easily as they stole it from the Russian state or as they stole it from other people, it could be stolen from them. And so they keep it in the West. They keep it in the United States. They keep it in London. That's why they're so upset.
And I find that very suspicious. They either stole it from other people or they stole it from the government. If you can't even say where the money came from and you supposedly found it, that means you followed a trail. So that trail started from somewhere, either from somebody or the government. It almost makes me wonder at this point, did Putin steal the money from... just a thought. Maybe he did steal the money. Oh, he's a bad boy. Now, this is the most recent one. At least I hope it is.
Mr. Bill Browder was arrested yesterday and then released in Spain. The international investor was taken into custody on a Russian Interpol arrest warrant, and he live tweeted the entire ordeal until he was freed, saying this: "Good news, Spanish National Police just released me after Interpol General Secretary in Lyon advised them not to honor the new Russian Interpol Red Notice. This is the 6th time that Russia has abused Interpol in my case." Browder claims he has been a target of the Russian government for shining a light on a multi-million-dollar corruption scheme allegedly involving Vladimir Putin. Joining me right now is himself, Bill Browder. He's the CEO of Hermitage Capital. Bill, good to see you this morning. Thanks so much for joining us.
Great to be here.
And, you know, Bill, you and I go back many years. And for many years, we have been talking about what has taken place in Russia and really what has happened to you over the years. We'll get back to the history in a minute. But tell us yesterday what happened, Bill.
Well, I was in Spain yesterday to meet with the senior anti-corruption prosecutor in Spain because we found money connected to the murder of my lawyer, Sergei Magnitsky, coming into Spain, and I was going to provide him evidence. So I was in Spain for that meeting. At 9:40 a.m. in the morning, 2 police officers from the Spanish National Police.
Now you watch that for a little bit. And again, you see that same stiffness, sticking and talking points inside the brain. Just talking points, stiffness and talking points. Yes, the other man that you see that's the guy that was killed in prison.
Knocked on my hotel door. They asked for my identification. I showed it to them. They confirmed that I was who they were looking for. And they said, "Mr. Browder, you're under arrest." They then took me to the police station in the back of a police car with the sirens blazing and the blue lights on. I get to the police station. I'm being processed in the police station. They then make some inquiries to Interpol to let them know that I had been arrested. And it was at that point that somebody senior at Interpol intervened and said, "Wait a second, we can't arrest this guy. This guy is being targeted by Putin. This is a politically motivated arrest warrant," and they canceled it. And so I was let go about 90 minutes into this whole ordeal, and I was able to come back to London without any trouble. The irony of the whole thing is that normally when you're on one of these Interpol arrest warrants and you get taken in, it takes you 3 to 6 months to get yourself free. Because I live tweeted it, the whole thing was resolved.
Let's see, but watch this.
It takes you 3 to 6 months to get
that swallow. That's when you're controlling yourself so much and you're that stressed that it's not natural at that moment to swallow because you're not relaxed. If you're in a relaxed conversation, unless you're trying to get a point across real quick because you want to talk over somebody, that might happen. This is because of stress. Yes, he was just arrested and maybe bringing some stress on. Still does not give excuse of that same stiffness we've been seeing now for the past 2 interviews and into this interview.
This is the end of the snippet.
If you liked it, leave a like.
If you like the content, please subscribe using this link via specific feeds. You'll be sent notifications to the full-length videos and won't mysteriously be unsubscribed either. If you select single email, the notification will get to you much quicker. However, if you select newspaper, the notifications are sent out the same time every day, which is around 7 AM American time, when you will be sent a link to watch the full version of these videos for free. Of course, you can also sign up to view the paid content such as the crime series, which includes some of history's most notorious criminals, as well as the more recent Interesting Minds series. Ultimately, it's your subscriptions that help keep this channel going, because none of this content is monetized, and it probably never will be.
A big thank you to all of my supporters.